Okay. Uh, so Divyanshu, what has it been the journey that's led you to where you are today?
So obviously, there are a lot of aspects to it. I'll try and sum it up in sort of major phases. So as a child, was always interested in getting into aerospace. One of the dream jobs was astronaut. Got glasses very early in life, so knew that can't become an astronaut. So wanted to become a rocket scientist. Um, by the time I gave my 12th class examinations, I found out about this college called Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology. This is a college directly under ISRO. It used to take admissions through IIT. What is, I think, the examination today is IIT Advance. At our time, the system was a little different. Gave that, got into IST, did aerospace engineering over there. Right after IST, was in ISRO for approximately a year at ISAC in Bangalore, which is now URSC, UR Rao Satellite Center in Bangalore. Then around November, so I didn't want to complete a year in ISRO. So before the 1 year mark, I sort of quit, and I started this company called Popped Up. At that time, there was no Dine Out, there was no Zomato and Swiggy were not the common lingo that they are today. This is like way back in 2013, 2014. This is 2014, third quarter, fourth quarter. And at that time, like dining out was still a very, very, like, you, if you know some place, you go there, and it was not really a digital experience per se. And we started this app called Popped Up. The idea was that it was a smart loyalty app. So you could make this app would provide multiple restaurants the ability to target a single customer based on a single profile. So if you are a consumer who likes having beer, the app will reflect your paying beer bills by beer points, and then restaurants can specifically send you offers related to beer. So this was we did a pilot with some 7-8 restaurants in Bangalore. This ran on for approximately a year. There's two of us. Mostly we were sort of paying for our own beer, and that's what so that was the target, sort of beer lunches and beer events, and so that was the initial sort of theme with which we did that. But both of our lives took a turn around that time. I had always wanted to build model rockets. So while I was in college, I found out about something called model rockets. So these are like small rockets. They're anywhere between 1 feet to 3.5, 4 feet tall, and they fly using solid fuel. So that's exactly like a solid fuel powered launch vehicle or an actual PSLV or a GSLV, which is launching satellites. But these are like small rockets, and they're flying on the same principle. They're using the same type of propulsion and so on, and same type of aerodynamics. So I found out about this when I was in college, and I wanted to build one. At that time, the idea was that I'll go into ISRO and I'll build these actual big rockets which are going to launch satellites into space. So I can definitely build these small ones, right? These are easy, right? That was the idea, but I was quite wrong. One of the things was that in India, there was nothing available. We couldn't find a single component, a single system that we needed. We couldn't find the fuel. We couldn't find the components of the rockets. We couldn't find ignition systems. We couldn't find launch systems. We couldn't find safety gear. So we literally had to, so it was 3-4 of us, college students. So we wanted to build these rockets, and we literally had to build everything from scratch. And what we used to do was we used to go into all of these college festivals here and there, participate in different events based on each one of our skill set, and pull in the money that we used to win, and use that to buy components and materials for these rockets. We even imported a few things from the US. And we were very lucky because we were in a college inside of ISRO. We had access to the most amazing mentors, to the most amazing professors, and to the most amazing labs and equipment. So we could literally walk into our chemistry lab and like make propellant, and we would have everything that we needed, from the chemicals to the safety gear, mixing equipment, ovens, curing equipment, and all of this stuff. And we had amazing professors like K. Nayan and B. N. Suresh, who not only knew what they were talking about and how we could do this stuff, but they were very supportive and encouraging in the sense that they used to allow us to do it. And by saying that they used to allow us to do it, it was a big deal. We used to create a lot of destruction. So like we blew up one pillar in the chemistry lab. We blew up the chemistry lab oven.
Very Rick and Morty. I see your T-shirt.
And there was a concrete bench near the basketball court. We blew that up. So yeah, even after all of that, they were supportive of us doing this, and we used to do it. And at that time, having all of those resources available to us in terms of mentorship, guidance, equipment, facilities, and apart from that, all of us were fairly blessed in life. So we were able to pull in financial resources as well. We were able to go to competitions. We were able to do things. And we still, could build one of these rockets. Like, we built some 70, 80 through 3 years. The cost of one successful rocket for us approximately was 25,000 rupees. And this was unacceptable. This was like we were very lucky we could do it. Nobody could do this stuff. Like the few people who were doing it when we started researching around India, it was like 500-600 people across the country doing it in a country of 1 billion people. And that to a country which was a leader in space tech globally. We were launching satellites, launching rockets. We have like some of the best Earth observation capabilities in the world, and so on. And we didn't have a rocketry ecosystem, and we couldn't have rockets being built by students. Whereas if you look at other such similar ecosystems across the world, whether it's the UK, Israel, US, Australia, students could just build model rockets. Like in the US, it costs like what, $10, $12 to build a small model rocket. That's 500-600 rupees, and it should be cheaper over here. It should not be more expensive. We have bigger scale. Cost of materials is cheaper. Cost of transportation is cheaper. So it should definitely be cheaper over here. And but it isn't. And that was just not something that ever sat well with me. And I used to feel that there must be these thousands of students who would want to do this. It's such a fun activity. It makes you learn so much. And so it had always been a dream to try and create this sort of a thing. And around 2014 end or 2015 beginning is when I found this one partner in Amin Explosives in Nagpur, who was ready to provide us with the infrastructure in his manufacturing unit to set up things and to start doing experimentation to genuinely create India developed model rocketry products. And that's when iQuit popped up, and we hadn't really built a team. And even my co-founder, his name is Edward, he was moving on to Bombay from Bangalore because he was also working on some other actually female safety products, which is like it's like a SOS button that you can carry in your purse, and it directly connects to the police switchboard in Bombay.
Wow.
So like if a woman is feeling unsafe and she has that, she can just press it and it will directly create an alarm in the police switchboard in Bombay and with the location of the switch. So police can respond in real time. So that's what he was doing, and that thing was taking off over there. So so he shifted to Bombay, I shifted back to Ludhiana and Nagpur, and we started doing this, and that's how sort of Rocketeers came about.
Okay, amazing. So you talked about having that mentorship, guidance, and the resources to do all of these things. My next question to you would be, what role do you think that mentorship has played when you reflect on what happened? How has it affected you, and how has it kept the scientist in you ignited?
So I think I've been very lucky because the kind of experience that I got at IST, or not just me, I would say approximately 500 students in the history of India. These are like the first 3-4 batches of IIST. So when I joined the college, there was no alumni, there was no campus. Like our campus was inside ISRO campus. There was no alumni. The oldest students in the college were in their 3rd year. The professors were actually the scientists, and the hostels that we were staying at was actually the ISRO guest house. It was a beachside hostel with private rooms for all students, with private bathrooms. Like I didn't have that big a room at home, and and we used to get this 5-star meals at the guest house mess, and So this was just the life side of it. But even apart from that, because the college was in such a nascent stage at that point of time, the kind of involvement that was there from ISRO scientists and the kind of access that we had to ISRO labs, ISRO facilities was unprecedented. And that's something that's locked in time. Because as the college grew, they found their own campus, they found their own labs. Instead of ISRO scientists being your teachers, they were actual professors which would be your teachers, which from a education standpoint is a better thing. The kind of academic activity that is happening over there now was not there in our time. But that experience of being able to see ISRO from the inside as a student, being able to talk to all of these people, like, we could just walk into Kalam sir's office. Kalam sir used to come and teach us like lectures. Like he took 40 lectures from me over my 4 years.
Oh my
So like B.N. Suresh, he's like a Padma Vibhushan. He's like the man behind the PSLV, and he used to be hanging around us, and that helped us develop those relationships as well, because it was such a small community that everybody got to know everybody, and even till today, all of those people are just a phone call away. Wow. And they know us by name, and not just me, they know every student that passed out of these 4 or 5 batches, like these 400-500 people. They know everyone by name. It's not that like I am some sort of a special thing over here. This was something that was the norm, and that I think was pivotal, and it definitely opened our mind to a different set of possibilities and the kind of things that we could do. It really set us on the trajectory to, like, it really set all of us 400-500 alumni on the trajectory to kind of, take the world by storm in terms of what Indian space tech is capable of. And I think we will start seeing that very soon. We already see so many things happening, which has so many of these ISTNs involved. And so in that sense, it's not just my journey that highlights how important that time zone and that mentorship and that resources was, but it shows you on a broad scale that yes, this was amazing.
Great. So coming back to the topic that you just brought up, there are so many changes that are coming up that are facilitating this growth. I think we recently saw Shri Nirmala Sitharaman announce that the space tech industry is going to open to private players. So how do you think that's going to affect you? I'm sorry, I'm deviating from the questions we had decided, but I think this is going to be much more.
That's not an issue at all. See, there are a bunch of announcements, but even though it's a political statement, like, they're just announcements right now. Like, let's just see that how they're implemented, what really changes, because structurally in our system, there are flaws that limit our capabilities and our industry. We have some of the best scientists, some of the best minds, and some of the best capabilities in terms of the tech. But just having that is not enough when it comes to an ecosystem like space, because not only does it require extremely high risk and extremely high capital, but at the same time, it also has implications for stuff like national security and national needs and so on. There are lots of strategic issues that are involved when it comes to space. And because of that, overall, the approach of the government has been sort of protectionist. And it's not just this government, but that has been the approach of how governments across the world throughout history have approached space.
Right.
And that mindset started needing change over the last 2 decades. And obviously, US is leading the pack, but a lot of other agencies are now adapting to this required change, and otherwise we do fall behind. And even though we might have all the tech and all the capability, but it would limit our sort of ability to impact the world in this industry. But if we play it right, we have the potential to sort of become the space hub for the world, like we became the IT hub for the world. And trust me, this is and the beauty of it is that it is a service-based industry. We lead at services, and this is the almost 45 to 50% revenue that is generated in the space economy is a service-based revenue. So in that sense, I think we can really do wonders, and it needs to be seen that what kind of changes, like the changes that they have announced, may sound well or very good on paper. They don't sound very good, but yeah, they're good on paper. But let's see how it plays out.
Okay, amazing. Coming back to you, this is a very personal question about how you operate. What keeps you curious and what keeps you going as a scientist?
So I don't really know what keeps me curious. But yeah, I like to learn about things. I like to know about them. Whenever I find something that's interesting to me, I would want to understand it properly and how it works and so on. So in that sense, I try and gather as much knowledge as possible. Another thing is that I love talking, and intelligent conversations or fun conversations are the ones that actually have some new information being
Okay.
presented or some new information being discussed. So in that sense, intelligent conversation only comes if you're aware about stuff.
Right,
So
absolutely.
so in that sense, like if I'm visiting a doctor, I would like to talk to him about CRISPR. So so then I need to know what is CRISPR. So that's what keeps me curious.
Amazing. Uh, Coming back a little on a broader scale, how do you think we can inculcate this curiosity for science in young minds? You know, there are a lot of students who are moving into science, but how do we keep it going?
So
How do we sustain it?
my answer might sound a little cliche, but I think one thing that is starkly missing from the education system that we have is hands-on stuff. So our education system is weird in that sense that, let's say for example, you have that average school in India which will be which has a minimum set of resources. It caters to almost approximately 1,000 students. That's what the average number for national schools are. um, it usually has two buildings, almost 40 students sitting per room.
Hmm.
And in these 1,000 students, approximately 400 students are senior students. That's 8th class and above. And in these 400 students, they have one computer lab which has 40 computers. So the ratio is like 10:1. And now, okay, this thing is there. That's a good thing that they're at least getting some access, right? Now the instruction is बच्चों को छूना allowed नहीं है.
Yeah.
The students are not allowed to touch it. This is the same thing that happens with so many of these other facilities. Like for example, Atal Tinkering Labs. It's a beautiful program that has been set up by the Indian government, by Niti Aayog. There are more than 2,000 schools that now have Atal Tinkering Labs. Almost all of those labs have all the teachers knowing everything and no students touching anything. So so as soon as you start doing that, you the knowledge base of the student is limited to theory, and this translates into each and every aspect of our lives. And as by default, the kind of approach that the student starts developing is that मेरे को मैं नहीं कर सकता, मेरे को करना allowed नहीं, I can't do this, some other expert senior XYZ person will do this, and I can't do this, I'm not allowed to do this. And this translates into limitation of curiosity as well, where just because I can't do this, मैं समझ भी जाऊंगा तो मैं क्या करूंगा, मैं नहीं कर सकता. So whereas if you let the student do everything and then he can't do something, then it's like a completely different situation. Then the idea is कि मेरे को करने को मिल रहा है लेकिन मैं ये कर नहीं पा रहा. It's a completely different approach. That's what happens with so many of these kids when at young age we're playing sports, right? And some other friend is better batsman, or some other friend can run faster, and you want to beat them. There's a sense of competition, and you want to be better. And why can't you do it? Because you're allowed to touch the bat and the ball and you're allowed to play, you have that sense.
Right.
So we need to flip this equation, and we need to have a system where teachers are just facilitators and students are the ones that are really doing the stuff. And that as soon as we start inculcating that on a broad level in the way we teach our kids, and that's where we will start seeing a lot of them really channeling their curiosity in a much more positive way.
Amazing. So, coming back to your organization, in Rocketeers, do you have interns or students coming in to learn about all of this? Are there any programs that you've been hosting? Anything?
So, we used to. Very honestly, we don't now. And the approach that we sort of try and take is that we try and enable other entities, organizations, companies to be able to do that even in the field of rocketry.
Okay.
So so for example, we'll work with a company like TechKritya or a RoboCart or a VizRobo, which are all STEM education companies working in their regions, working with their student base and their school base. And they all may have different models as well. It's not even like they're working in the same way. Like VizRobo has a center of their own where the students come to them. TechKritya may go and set up lectures in every school that they partner with. Somebody else might have some other model. And what we do is that we try and train their faculty, we try and get them educated, and we try and make sure that they have all the necessary material, all the necessary equipment, and all the necessary service that they might need for troubleshooting. And then they have access to mentors. So we'll connect them to the right kind of mentors and so on. And then they can sort of take rocketry as an educational format in whatever way suitable to as many students as possible. Internally, we have a very, very small team. We're just 6 people. So the bandwidth of having a lot of interns gets fairly limited. And also, we don't have a lot of project-based activity happening in the way that we operate. We are more of a manufacturing company that concentrates on building out a product, then manufacturing it at scale and supplying it at the lowest possible prices to as many people as possible. So that laser focus stops us from doing sort of project-based stuff. Just to put this in perspective, we are not the only people who are doing rocketry, right? There are other companies and other entities who are pursuing rocketry as a thing, very like, at a very good level themselves. Like I can give you names like STAR, Space Development Nexus. Star Labs is Surat based, Space Development Nexus is Delhi based. I could Brahmastra Aerospace also might be doing something. So as soon as you have these groups who are sort of into rocketry and they start looking at engaging as many students as possible, getting interns, getting college engineering students interested in doing some interesting stuff, like getting in a team of 10 students over 6 months or something like that. The first 2 questions that come about asking about the rocket is, how big is it and how high will it fly? Right? Those are the first 2 questions everybody asks, right? How big are we going to build this and how high will it fly? And this is before even you began. And we don't ask those questions. Our answers to those questions is that it's very, very small and it doesn't go high. Because the idea is not that. The idea for us is that 500 students are building 500 of these.
Right.
Or like 20,000 students are building 20,000 of these. So we don't want them to be big or... Yeah, so it's a completely different approach. And because of that, we really don't have a lot of project-based stuff that would be genuinely interesting and challenging for a lot of students to pursue. But that in itself is something that we do recommend. We do get a lot of queries from students who are trying to look for opportunities which are like that. And we try and connect them to the right kind of organizations who can sort of help them out based on their level and so on.
Right.
But we as a team focus more on sort of scaling up manufacturing, creating safe, reliable, accessible products.
Right. So what are your plans for the future of space as Rocketeers?
As Rocketeers, so see, we right now going through a major sort of churn in trying to understand what is going to be our place in this post-COVID world. Because a lot of the companies that used to work in our domain have transitioned to online learning, and where they are conducting classes in a way very similar to the way you and me are talking. And that may work well for theory lectures. It may at time work well even for interactive sort of a setting where you have a minimum number of students and there is a significant amount of engagement and interaction with each student individually. The kind of models that say White Hat Junior tries to sort of emulate, where they try and have 1:2 or 1:1 sort of a ratio between the teacher and the student. But we as a company have never really been a teaching company per se, even though almost all the people in our team have taken their fair share of classes and workshops and events. But as a company, we don't really concentrate on doing 500 workshops ourselves. We concentrate on doing maybe 5 flagship workshops that are exemplary and then enabling 200 companies to conduct 5 of their own. And so we will just, so that's a different approach. And so we did not want to transition to an online format.
Right. So I think again, the scalability factor comes in where you're trying to build something, even like the education you're trying to impart is at scale by educating other companies to
Yes.
facilitate that.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, our model has been very hands-on. So this was the first problem, and the second problem was that our model has been very hands-on. We don't have a single workshop that has more number of theory hours than hands-on hours. For example, our most basic workshop is the 8 hours basic model rocketry workshop. Out of the 8 hours, 6 hours are hands-on. Only first 2 hours are theory. We have a 16-hour more advanced version. In that, almost 10, 12 hours are hands-on. We have a 24-hour engineering level version. In that, 20 hours are hands-on. So it's the whole education methodology is devised around students doing stuff with stuff, and that becomes much more difficult on an online platform anyway by default, because the student doesn't have the stuff, he doesn't have the kit, he doesn't have the materials.
Right.
Which in a classroom setting was possible, where you could take the materials to the classroom, but now it becomes a much more challenging problem. So over the last sort of 5-6 months, what we've tried and done is that develop a system which will enable our partners to take our education philosophy online. So how we can do that is that we tell them that okay, you have we've shown you that theory is a very minimum thing when it comes to our model. So what you can do is you can do the workshops online, and we will ensure that every kid that is participating in the workshop has a rocket and a launch pad and an ignition system and the safety gear delivered to their home. And so when you're teaching them online, they can do it on the screen in front of you, and it will be much smaller batches, but it's still a hands-on thing. So that's something that we've tried to. So we've done a couple of pilot online workshops where it's rocketry delivered to your doorstep, sort of a thing. And we are now, over the next sort of 6-7 months, trying to see how we can sort of scale this up. We've already announced 18 workshops for November to April with 3 partners, and we will not be teaching again. The idea is to sort of enable them to be able to do it, and we will. But our team will be attending each and every session of all of these workshops as silent viewers. We'll be giving them feedback. We'll be making sure quality is maintained. And we'll be looking at how we can make sure that it gets better from here. And apart from that, we're also trying to sort of dabble in some other products now. So we've developed a lot of manufacturing capability, and we have this whole supply chain, and at the core, we've been a manufacturing company. So now, when this business has slowed down and we will need to figure out how it scales up again, we have all of this capacity lying idle. And that in itself is a cost. So we're trying to. So up till now, we never really dabbled in other products, whereas we got recommendations a lot of times from stuff like drones and gliders to stuff like space merchandise or whatever. Like so many different. Everybody has different ideas, right? And tum ye bhi banao, wo bhi banao. So it keeps coming from here and there. So, but we never really did that, and now we are finally sort of exploring some new products. The idea is that these products will be extremely unique, the kind of things that you will not see in the market, and they will definitely connect to space. So, for example, we've partnered with Club of the Future, which is a US-based. So I'm sure you know about Blue Origin.
Yes.
So Blue Origin is Jeff Bezos. So he's like Elon Musk has SpaceX. Jeff Bezos has Blue Origin. It's like billionaires trying to go to space. So Blue Origin has this not-for-profit wing called Club of the Future, which is their outreach wing. As a part of this, what they do is that they work with high schools across the US, and students can then write a postcard which they address to themselves and give it to the Club of the Future. The Club of the Future collects all of these postcards from all over US, puts them in a rocket, takes them to space, brings them back, and then sends them back to all the kids. So all the kids now have a postcard from space.
Wow.
This becomes even more fun if a guy has sent it to his girlfriend. It's a postcard from space. So they sort of market it like that. That it's a postcard from space, and so we have now become their official India partners.
Wow.
And we will be running this campaign in India where we will be collecting postcards, but we have tweaked it a little for an Indian audience. What we have done is that you don't need to buy a postcard or any other specific postcard. you can have a piece of paper, you can cut out a cardboard box and have that cardboard piece. You can have whatever. You just need to write your address on it. You need to have your message on it, and you can send it to us, and we will bring that back to you. And the idea of making this change was that we want it to be as accessible as possible. It's a free campaign, so anybody can get it. Like, you can send it, anybody can do it.
I
There
plan
is
to
no
now.
criteria.
I'm gonna research about
There
it
is
and
no
probably send
criteria,
it.
and there is no sort of limitation. And there is no limitation in the sense that more postcards the merrier. Like, our targets are, I'm sure, beyond what we will be able to do. So even though it's a free campaign and people can send in anything, but apart from that, we've also designed some 15 postcards which are specifically space themed. They have nice, interesting spacey photographs and spacey art and stuff like that happening on them. And you can use those. And but those are available to buy. There'll be a little premium. But then it becomes a very wholesome, special kind of a thing.
Right.
Yeah. So this is one of our products. Another product that we are now looking to do is a chess set. So where all the chess pieces are like rockets. So your Raja, the king that you have in your chess sets, on one side, that king is going to be the Saturn V rocket, which is the moon rocket of Neil Armstrong.
Wow.
And the Rook on that side is GSLV, which is our own GSLV, the ISRO GSLV rocket, which launched Mangalyaan. And in between we have Soyuz, we have Starship, all of these. This is one side. So these are all real rockets that have flown. So it'll be like the chess piece itself will be the model. And on the other side, we have fictional rockets. So like your king over there is the Millennium Falcon from Star Trek, and your Rook over there is the Death Star from Star Wars. Wow. And so stuff like that. So it's real rockets versus fictional rockets. This is going to be a chess set. We're going to make it fairly big. The smallest chess pieces, like the pawns, are going to be 3 inches tall.
Oh wow! So it's going to be a collectible edition, probably.
Yeah. So these products are all going to be limited edition. And they're all being built in a very sustainable way. Like all the materials that we are using are recyclable or biodegradable, we try and limit. So even that's a philosophy throughout our product design. Like even in our DIY kits, we have this instruction manual. It's a 10-page long instruction manual that we have to give in hard copy because that's needed from an Indian audience perspective. Like if a group of students in some rural region in Tamil Nadu are going to get a bunch of rockets, they will not be able to access a digital manual. Right. So they need a hard copy manual. And this is like 10 pages per kids of paper. Just, like this is like so much paper getting destroyed. Because after they've built that first rocket, they're going to throw this away. It's not something that they will need again. And what we have done is that we have cut and fold this manual in a specific style. So I can probably show you one on video. I'll get one. And it converts into a A1 size space themed poster for your bedroom.
Oh, wow.
So you can read it like a book, and then you can open it up and it becomes a poster.
Wow, that's incredibly smart.
So students, they just get a poster and they don't throw it away. And so even the packaging box that we have, that also looks like a rocket. Yeah, this is it.
Wow.
So, this is just the box, but nobody is going to throw away this box.
Yeah, it's probably a collectible. They're going to keep it to remember, a keepsake.
It look nice kept there.
Yeah, but I think that's how the brain of a scientist works. You try to make do with resources, and you want them to last. That poster thing is actually pretty incredible.
Yeah, so I think I can show you one. Just hold on for a second. Like a video, definitely.
Amazing, yes.
So I'll just switch my camera to the other side. So yeah, so this is our office.
Wow, very sciencey space you have.
Yeah, so like we have like interesting stuff happening all over. So this that you see over here is like an infographic. That I actually designed it myself, the whole infographic. It's available to download for free on our website. So this is like the story of space technology. So what you see happening over here is there is past on that side, and there's a timeline that's moving towards the future.
Wow.
And it starts in the 1960s, and we get Neil Armstrong, and we see so much tech that's being developed, and we go all the way back to the moon, and then it stops. So it comes down, and then slowly it starts growing again.
Wow.
And so that's the exponential trend that we are now finally achieving. And meanwhile, over here at the bottom, we have India, which is a country which is a little different. So we have Chandrayaan over here, then we have Mangalyaan over there, and
Wow.
that's like the
Beautiful.
future. And then we have this over here, which is a technology trends map. This is by a Harvard professor, and it maps all of these things. So like it maps society and culture, geopolitics, financial services, technology, economy, transportation, from the present to the future. So the inside part is the present and outside is the future. So it's mapping all of those things. And it's designed like a metro map. It looks like a metro map.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And over here, we have like the chart of cosmic exploration. So this is only updated till 2015. So just to show it to you a little closer. So over here, what's happening is that this is the Earth. And all these spacecrafts come out of Earth, they circle around Earth, and then they go to different places, whether it's the moon or the sun or Venus or Mars. And these are all real spacecrafts by all countries. So in the history of humanity, every exploratory mission that we have launched up till 2015, those are mapped on this single sort of chart. And this is also one of the posters that you get. So this is the, so wait, I'll just, 1 second. Yeah. So this is the instruction manual that you get. So when you're reading it as an instruction manual, this is how you read it. It looks like a book. And now once you're done with it, it becomes sort of useless. So it starts opening up. And how do you open it up? Like this. And you have the chart of cosmic exploration.
Wow. Amazing. I think that's great use of paper. That's incredible.
Yeah. And so you probably won't throw it away. It goes onto your wall. And it sort of becomes a part of your sort of room. And you can fold it back, use it like a book again.
I think your office is a wonderland for people who are interested in science and space and all of that.
We've got a lot of different things. This is also a new product that we're doing. So this is a Diwali themed limited edition set that I'm doing only for friends and family. It's going to be available on our website if somebody is interested. But there are only few sets. So it's a set of playing cards, as you can see. Right. It's a set of normal playing cards. There's nothing special on the playing card aspect of it. But each card is a different sort of space themed photo.
Wow, that's amazing. I think a lot of science interested and space interested students are going to have a good Diwali this time.
Wow. Yeah, so this is one of the things. This is like a bunch of bookmarks that we are doing. These are the postcards, by the way, the ones that I was talking about.
You're going to send to space and bring them back.
Yeah.
It says science is the only magic, does it? Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I kind of agree to that. Beautiful. These are amazing.
So this is curiosity.
Yes.
Since we were talking about keeping curiosity alive, it's dying soon. I'm very sad about it.
It's not going to die if companies like yours keep existing.
No, I'm saying that Curiosity rover on Mars.
Oh yeah. So I know it's itself happy birthday every year, which is sad.
Yeah. So yeah, these are those postcards and brochures and like stuff like that. So we've been doing a bunch of new things. This is what the rockets look like.
Wow, they look incredibly interesting. Is this what students build when they get that kit?
Yes. So this rocket is called the Bumblebee, and it's inspired from the Transformer Bumblebee.
Okay.
So it's black and yellow, and it looks a little Transformerish. It doesn't really look like a rocket. This one is CSLV, which is the CanSat launch vehicle. So this has a capability of carrying a camera and stuff.
Wow.
This one is called RB300, and this is like this like inspired to look like a missile.
Wow, these are really incredible.
So yeah, this is
definitely an amazing office tour. Is there anything else you'd like to show us?
Sure. So this is like, I can show you our complete office. So this is like the studio area. So this is where we shoot photos and videos of the stuff. This is like the office areas. That's my table. This is my co-founder's table.
Right.
And that's my whiteboard. This is my co-founder's whiteboard. And this is like the packaging area. So this is where all the stuff that gets delivered to the students gets packed.
Wow.
And gets built.
Amazing.
And like this is also like the stocking area. So behind this wall, the entrance is from outside. That's where we have our main stock and manufacturing area.
Mm-hmm.
Over there, we have a small pantry. We have a fridge and a cafe for like sort of like a hot case for all the people to keep their food and stuff.
Okay, amazing.
And yeah, this is about it.
Great. I think I just have one question if we get back and we can just close on this.
Yeah.
My final question to you is, as a scientist or as a rocket scientist, what is your ultimate form of validation?
I don't know. I don't think I've gotten validation yet.
You haven't gotten validation yet. But
No,
when you think
definitely.
of yourself, probably...
You're so hungry for validation.
I think a lot of people are, but in an industry like yours, I think patience is a virtue. I hope.
Yeah, definitely. I think patience is a virtue in everything. Even in the most fast-moving industries, and even the ones where there's biggest challenge and there's a competition and feels like a race, even over there, I think patience is so important, right? You can just look at some of the biggest, most challenging startup journeys of the world, even current ones like Tesla or SpaceX, which are like currently going through a phase which is so high growth. They're doing so much. They're racing against all of these big players, and it's a change on everyday level, and there's so much validation. But from a founder standpoint, Elon Musk will need to be having so much patience to wait and wait and wait, like over decades, to sort of see it really culminate.
Absolutely amazing.